our symbolism, if you will.
Michael, could you explain to everyone, this is actually a question for myself too, what the definitive, clear difference in what you mean by Judite and Jewish and Judaic, in the word meaning of Judite?
Well, it's a secret society term.
Okay.
We use the word Jewish to refer to people of a religion, and they do themselves. They use these terms for themselves. The term, and this is a word play, very similar to what we were talking about earlier, about how words have been misconstrued and misinterpreted. Secret societies know that behind the lodge door, there is no such thing as religious difference or political divide. This is all made for TV.
Right.
When you understand that, then what I say next makes sense. Because I always define, when I get a question like that, I always say that the Pope of Rome can be a Judite, even though he heads the Catholic religion, or apparently heads the Catholic religion. Whereas the Queen of England is also a Judite, even though she heads the Protestant religion. And it's because, and even there's an Islamic version and what have you, the Seveners, the Frankists. All of these people know fine rightly what that term really means. It goes back to a very, very powerful secret society called the Gaionum. That's why you have a capital G in Masonry in the middle of the compass and rule. The G does not stand for God, goddess, geometry, or any of that nonsense. It stands for Gaionum, which is a super secret steering committee that's many thousands of years old, that was started by the descendants of the pharaoh Akhenaton. This is what I go into in the Irish Origins DVD and book.
Right.
Another word for Gaionum is Aton, Atonists. That's just because their god was Aton. They have other names for their god, of course.
And is it correct that we get the letter A from this and different?
Not from it. No, the A was a word that was from, in Egypt, it was symbolized by the eagle, Ahom. But the symbol of the eagle is being used for its solar principles, and partly because it comes from the tribe of Manasseh. When you realize that when they talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, you're actually talking about the 12 tribes of Aton, the 12 tribes of the Gaionum. You're talking about its secret society language. It's like a code that the military is given. Say that in military code, you have the code, somebody sends you a map, but unless you can overlay the sort of a key over that map, you won't know where the maneuvers are. So when we all use these languages in normal daily life, we're missing the secret society filter. When you know what secret societies are about and study them, then you have the key that now makes you decipher the map better. And then these words and terms start to take on their true meaning, you see, and the regalia that these people use, all the architecture that you see in America, the various phrases that the politicians use, and so on, starts to now make true esoteric sense.
Right.
What they want to do is divert you. There's been a campaign to divert you so that you think that when you're saying words like Atonism, or when you're talking about Judaism, you're speaking in purely terms of the religion, which has almost next to no connection at all to any of this stuff. The Gaionum, I was going to say, would be more well known to people if I was to use the word Sadducee. Religious people would understand that there was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the Pharisees are well known as being the lawgivers and the priest class that ran Jerusalem, you see, and had problems with Jesus and what have you. They were featured in the Bible. And their rival group was known as the Sadducees, who were multimillionaires. They were the elite. They were the rich elite aristocracy of Judea at the time. Not just of Judea, by the way. That's partly another lie. But the Sadducees, to cut a long story short, the Pharisees on paper were very much against the Roman presence. They were against any conquering force, whether it be Greek or whether it be Roman during the biblical times. Whereas the Sadducees had always been in deep business relationships and also ideological, religious, spiritual relationships with these so-called conquerors. Because again, it's easy to change the word invader to the word visitor, and all of these terms have again been misconstrued. The Romans were not just a military force there to conquer in the way that history books show, in this sort of cartoon Hollywood way.
Right.
These interactions between these lands had been going on amicably for many, many hundreds of years, and the business relationships and the powerful dynastic concerns had been as old as the 18th dynasty in Egypt. And one of these movements, one of these groups, the Sadducees, were well in with the elite patrician families of Greece and Rome and many other more elusive dynasties, and they were the intellectuals. it's basically from them. It's basically, they are the ones who kept the tradition of the true Atonism, the pure Atonism, whereas the Pharisees were the ones who basically created the law, the Torah, the laws that we know today, the Bible as we see it today, even though it's largely still an Atonist ideology. It's contaminated by the more familiar Pharisaic traditions, which are more well known. What I mean is that in history, the Pharisee existence is ostensibly continued, whereas the Sadducees in history are meant to just drop off the map. They just suddenly completely disappear. This is something I can't understand why people haven't noticed this. The Sadducees apparently just completely disappear from history. One minute they're there, and the next minute they're not. And most scholars pay them no mind at all. But when you've done your homework, you find out that these Sadducees, as well as some very elite Pharisees, actually go back to an ancient order called the Order of Melchizedek, or the Sons of Zadok. And then you discover, as I've done, that through that you find out that this Melchizedek is nothing more than a stand-in, if you will, in exactly the same way that Moses was a stand-in for Akhenaten. There was no Melchizedek, there was no Moses. These are scripted simulacras. These are sort of actors. They're just actors. They're just purely fictional renderings of the lost Akhenaten, who has not been addressed directly, but it's his lineage that has continued down and animates all of these secret societies. So Rosicrucianism, Templarism, the Priory de Zion, the Masons, and a lot of other groups that you can think of, especially these powerful alpha lodges in England that the royal family members belong to, like the Order of the Knights of Garter, the Order of St. John, the Order of St. Michael and St. John, the Knights of Malta over in Rome, the Knights of Rhodes. All of these groups are purely Atonist, and they come down, the so-called Jewish or Judaic elements are coming from these elite Sadducees and their schools, and the Gaonim, which is again an extremely elite group that thought all of this up. They were the ones who had to keep the knowledge of Egypt, the knowledge that had to be thrown out when Akhenaten got thrown out. They preserved it, they kept it, and they're the ones who came up with what we now know as the New World Order. And the symbols that you find in America that are on the dollar bill, they're their symbols. So when certain scholars come along and say, look, there's some Jewish symbols, look, there's a Jewish Star of David, I know they mean well, and I know they're trying their best, and they're getting a handle on this, but they're going to end up in a cul-de-sac, because that's a cul-de-sac that's been designed for you to go down. They want you to just be bashing Jews. They just want you to be getting into all this conflict.
Sure.
So that you don't see the hidden hand.
It's the MO.
What's that?
It's the, excuse me, it's the MO. It's divide and conquer. It's divisionary. You get
and that's why when you look
other.
at these pictures in history and you see that insider smile on Winston Churchill's lips, or that insider smile on the Pope, or on the Queen of England, or on Brzezinski, or whoever, now you know what that insider smile is all about. They can barely contain their glee, their happiness, their joy, that all you people are running around like headless chickens waving flags and butchering and murdering each other for things that are utterly preposterous. Zionism is created by the British Fabians, the British aristocracy. Socialism as we know it throughout the world, not only the socialism that was involved in Russia, but the socialism that is now ubiquitous in America, is also created by British aristocrats. How does that work? How can people who are the richest people in the world be espousing so-called socialist ideology? You understand it when you realize that, again, behind the lodge door, none of these divisions matter at all. With one hand, they've got to preserve their existence so that they're not threatened, so that the working class doesn't actually completely overthrow them. That's a fear. Another part of it is just a simple game that they just love to do. And two, the smallest coterie at the very top, remember that removed part of the pyramid at the top, that small group at the top, has the bigger and larger agenda of massive world control, massive mind control. They're the smartest ones at the top. The rest of them have not got a full picture of this and are themselves dispensable, as we know. Yes. Generals, popes, even certain prime ministers, and in many cases even royal figures when they step out of line. They are instantly disposable on the greater geopolitical game. And this goes for political parties down where we are. It's a laugh. It's a joke. The way this shenanigans goes on, and the way the Bill O'Reillys animated constantly, and the Russ Limbaughs and the whole circus on the lower level we observe. You're never going to work it out from looking at that. That is the end manifestation of an incredibly elaborate occult game of geopolitics and mind control that's been going on for centuries of time. Mm-hmm. And just to again summarize, so that when we see these terms being used, Catholic, Protestant, Islamic, Jewish. These are made for order. They don't even have any longevity. The word Jew, I think the word Jew itself in that spelling is only going back to like the 1800s or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Before that, it was known to be Judite, Judaic, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, we have like what the Anti-Defamation League, and all these different. They've lambasted David Icke up in Canada,
and they're funded by British aristocracy. The ADL and most of these Canadian versions of ADL, the B'nai B'rith, they're not endorsed by most Jews, by the way.
Right.
They're an extreme right-wing group that has its direct funding from the dukes and princes of Britain, as many of your presidents have done from the very, very beginning. The only thing is that they were expert in rhetoric, that's all. They just knew the sophistry. Benjamin Franklin was a British agent. Adolf Hitler was a British agent. These people just knew how to construe the language to give you talismanic terms so that you imagine that you're democratic, that you're free. You actually don't even know what these words mean. You haven't even worked it out yourself. You don't know what context it's in. This is why we're in such a mess today with the legal profession.
Right.
Why the legal profession has so much power over us is because we don't even know the meaning of the word citizen, or the meaning of the word state, or where these words came from, you see, and justice and all of these kinds of terms. Now, I'm glad to see that so many people are getting savvy to this, and that is an incredibly important thing. In fact, even when we were just talking there about the difference between Judaism and the tribes of Israel, the truth about that subject, because I've been studying it since 1980, and I had so many, blank spots. It's only been in the last 10, 15 years that the true information has come out. So we're in very recent times. That's why I'm usually an optimist, is because it's only in the recent times that we've even had access to the information that fits these missing pieces in.
Yeah.
Even back in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have it.
Yeah. What was it, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, even people couldn't even read the Bible. They were just dictated,
That's right. Before that, there was even few books, and literacy was down to a minimum. And even the books that you read were tightly controlled.
Yeah.
You were simply not, and even today, some of the greatest libraries in the world, we know this about the Vatican Library and other secret society libraries that are in Brussels and Belgium and Berlin and where have you. You have to be a member of a secret society to get in to read those books and see them. And then you're limited for time. How much can a man do? But my work specializes on those who have done that work. I'm like a liaison between the great scholars that I refer to throughout my websites and my work, to hopefully give people the backup information that will save them the 30, 40 years of not wasted research, but time. The time is of the essence now.
Yeah.
So I try to synthesize that. I do it on my websites to present these works of these great men that the world has completely forgotten about, so that while you're watching Dr. Phil, there's the graves of great men are being unattended, who had the deepest wisdom that is absolutely essential, not only to generate that thought again, to stimulate that muscle again. It's like they always say, if you don't stimulate a muscle, it becomes atrophied.
Right.
Well, the very muscles of thinking, the very muscle of thinking is ready to be completely and irreversibly atrophied. It's not just like, okay, we had, in the previous centuries, people were a bit, lackadaisical when it came to reading. We're way, 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 way beyond that. The new generation will not think, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, they want to end it forever.
Yep. And they're already doing it. They're already very, very close to that right now. Just give me a second, please.
No problem. We'll pause for a minute here.
If people go to, for instance, to my articles, michaeltsarion.com, go through to the article section. On the article, Weapons of Mass Destruction Found, and on the conspiracy, on the Constitution Con article, right, there's two articles there, you'll see the quotes from leading governors, presidents, and presidential advisors, what have you, totally sycophantically adoring, worshipping, drooling over the royal families. Joe Kennedy, for instance, was obsessed by having at least one of his sons. He had 6 sons, I think, and 1 daughter. He was obsessed by, he was an Anglophile. He was a well-known Anglophile. Read any biography of Joe Kennedy, and you'll find that he was obsessed with England, with the British aristocracy, with the royal family.
Right.
And was absolutely obsessed by getting at least one of his children married into British aristocracy, and he actually did it. His daughter is the one who actually went over and married some extremely senior duke. I never can remember who it is. She did that. And he brought up all the rest of his sons to adore Britain. And